Today's podcast is brought to you in part by Real Marketing, the only marketing firm recommended exclusively by the Institute. Real Marketing utilizes over 25 years of expertise, and their products are built and customized for you to dominate any neighborhood, anywhere. Go to realmarketingforyou.com. That's realmarketing4u.com. Also, look for past A State of Mind episodes with CEO David Collins as our guest. Jack, it is a pleasure to be with you again.
Hi, Tami. Great to see you today also. I'm really excited about today's topic. You mentioned a moment ago lifestyle as it relates to the luxury home market. And so you and I have talked before about how important the experience is. And that's what we're talking about today is how that purchase decision that buyers make in the luxury home market has oftentimes as much to do with the experience as it has to do with the house itself. And I think about that in terms of, not just home purchases, but lots of things that we do. You think about fine dining. When we decide on a really nice restaurant for a special occasion, we don't make the decision on going to that restaurant simply by the menu. Obviously, the menu is important, but oftentimes we think about the overall experience. It might be about, what's the sound level like? Is it good for conversation? What's the view from the restaurant? Is it sitting at the top of a high-rise building? Is it overlooking a gorgeous canal, waterfront? What's the overall atmosphere and the vibe? And so the experience becomes as important in the selection process of the restaurant as the actual meal itself. And so I equate that in a lot of ways to the way that a lot of times our clients are making purchase decisions on luxury homes, not just on the house and the nuts and bolts of square footage and the rooms it has and we've talked before, about interior design and about the features of the home, but it has to do with the experience of the home as it relates to the neighborhood and the community that surrounds the property. I think it's a really exciting topic.
I agree. It's about not only the journey, but how you end up. And you had mentioned also thinking about when you're choosing a vacation spot, that
Right.
it's not just about the where, it's about the why, right? Like what's that going to feel like when you get there, right? And you also mentioned how we get there, right? Talk about
Yeah.
that just a little bit.
Well, yeah, absolutely. Again, we think about planning vacations, and it's not just the destination, but it can be also the experience of, hey, do we travel first class? Maybe we do that on vacation, but we don't do that in everyday business travel. Do we travel by train? One of my favorite, if not my favorite vacation ever, was the Rocky Mountaineer to the Canadian Rockies. So it wasn't about where we were going. That was part of it, but it was riding on the Rocky Mountaineer with a glass top train and having a chef on the car and the whole experience of getting there. So, or taking a cruise as opposed to flying to an island, taking a cruise. So again, it's about creating these experiences. So yeah, I think there's a lot of ways that those types of things relate to our home purchasing as well, the luxury home market.
I think you're right. It's a great analogy because often in the luxury space, whether it's a primary residence or whether it's a secondary residence, the lifestyle or the experience that a property offers is what's going to draw the buyer. It's what's going to sell the property. And so I want to talk today about some examples of that and how we can use a niche approach to market our luxury listings to the right audience. And so when we started talking about this topic, you mentioned that your brokerage's website actually has search features based on lifestyle rather than just the ordinary home parameters, right? So I had to go check it out, and I thought it was fascinating. So tell us about that, right? And to set the stage, most brokerage websites, you can search for properties, and it's the whole MLS, and you enter the beds and the baths and all of that. But what do people find when they land on your brokerage's website?
Yeah, it's very interesting. Our marketing department has done a fabulous job by taking all the information that you would see typically in the MLS, but putting in a platform that's based on experiences. So, for example, instead of looking at, homes based on lot size and acreage or in a zip code or neighborhood, you would see things like city views, college life, celebrity spotting, which that one cracks me up, but it's
Of
funny.
course, of
It's
course.
yeah, but we're in Nashville and like LA or New York or some other places, there's a lot of celebrities in this town, and so people say, "Hey, where do the country music singers live?" You'd be surprised. There are people who start their home search wanting to know because they figure if that's where they are, this must be a nice area to be in. So there's, foodies, that's a category, talking about where all the cool restaurants are and urban living and eclectic feel. There's all these different categories on the website that allows the consumer, our clients, to search not just by those, again, nuts and bolts features of a home, but looking for homes that fill a need that they have. For example, we talked about urban living. So when they select that category, all the neighborhoods that fit in that category of urban living pop up, whether it be high rise or mid rise condos or downtown historic communities, things of that nature. So it puts those communities together based on those various topics, which is a fun way to search, particularly when you're not familiar with a town and you're trying to get the lay of the land. It's a really interesting way to approach it, I think.
And there were a number of those that really caught my eye, but also I want to point out that there were a number of them that were established communities,
Right,
cul-de-sacs, right?
right.
Like so for those people that are not looking for something kind of crazy or unique like that, that's actually in there as well. So that's something to speak of. Do you find a lot of folks that gravitate towards those communities that wouldn't necessarily be interested in some of the more eclectic ones?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think when I think of the typical consumer who's looking at luxury properties, at least for us in our market, oftentimes, they're looking for that more suburban, upscale neighborhood feel. And we have a lot of that obviously in the outskirts of Nashville, particularly in Williamson County where we're located. There's a lot of communities that kind of, that fit that need, if you will, the cul-de-sac, typical cul-de-sac community. And you think about buyers when they're, again, we've had in past topics, we've talked about people are moving across the country a lot more than they had been in years past, not because of a corporate move where it's a have to, but it's a lifestyle move because they want to. And so this topic fits really well with that because we've got people moving into our market, into your market, into the markets where our listeners are, where they're choosing to go somewhere because they've heard a lot of great things about a particular city and they want to experience that city. They feel like it's a good fit for them and their family. But a lot of times they just don't know the lay of the land. Now, of course, as brokers, that's what we do. We give them the lay of the land, give community tours. But this is a really fun way to start because in casual conversation, we're typically saying things like, well, tell me what you'd like to see in a neighborhood. And they're saying things like, and here's one we get a lot in the last few years. We want a home in a neighborhood that's walkable. That's
Mm.
it, walkable. They want an experience, not just a beautiful home, not just a home on a street with other beautiful homes in a safe neighborhood. They want to be able to walk somewhere that's interesting. And
And
so the experience might be, it doesn't sometimes we get the, I want to be able to walk to a Starbucks, or a coffee shop, right? Yeah, I'm sure you
yeah.
get that where you guys are. But a lot of times it's not necessarily being next to restaurants and retail. It could just be we want to be able to walk somewhere and see something besides a sidewalk. We want to walk along a greenway, and that's a big deal in our market. Do you guys have greenways in yours? Is that a
No, we've talked about this before. We don't have the concept of greenways, but I'm hearing it more and more around the country. So that is something. It could so walkability. You mentioned this
yeah?
or proximity, right? So if we want to lose the word walk, so that we're not excluding anybody
Sure,
who
of
is
course, yeah.
who's differently able. But so the way that your neighborhoods are presented even drills down further than that, right? Because it could be proximity to recreation and nature, or it could be proximity to great restaurants, which would appeal to the foodies. Or one of the things that I really appreciated, small town feel is one of the categories. right? And so having grown up in Tennessee, I certainly know that there are towns that fit that, right? I'm thinking off the top of my head, Bell Buckle
Yeah, sure.
would be for sure. And for our listeners, that's actually a real town. I went to school there, right? But that would not be your proximity to Starbucks, right? That would be the proximity to the local, ice cream shop or something like that. So I think it's really interesting that you can drill down. So walkability as the big thing, which is a buzzword these days, but that can mean so many things, so many different things to so many different people. And I love how this works. And then the other one that I really loved was there's a category for on the verge, right? And so this to me says this is like either a bohemian neighborhood or one that's revitalizing, gentrifying, something like that. And how important is that for somebody who really wants like a suburban cul-de-sac experience? They are not going to be interested
That's
in the
right.
on the verge neighborhoods and vice versa, right? So I love that one. Tell me a little bit about that kind of on the verge for you. What kind of places are there? What kind of folks are responding to that one?
Younger people mostly, and on the verge for our market, and I'm sure this you could probably describe this type of community with different language for different places all over the country. But like you said, it's the up and coming neighborhoods, and for us, you can basically take any neighborhood that is close, that's either in downtown Nashville or close to downtown Nashville, that you might walk through or drive through today and think, "Gosh, this does not look like a particularly nice place to live." Because maybe it's a real industrial area. There's lots of warehouses and things of that nature, but the neighborhood is changing, and we're seeing one by one these warehouses disappearing or old buildings, old commercial buildings giving way to loft development, for example, or warehouses coming down and brownstones going up or new construction. So they're in transition, but there's still a whole lot of other stuff in the area that may not make it the most ideal environment
Right.
for kid friendly, and there's not really playgrounds. It's not that fit, but it's on the verge,
Yeah.
and
And
we've
there's
got communities now that, honest to goodness, I can take people through and say, see this neighborhood right here, where you see them pushing strollers down the street 10 years ago. You wouldn't have seen a kid anywhere in this neighborhood
Yep.
because 10 years ago it was on the verge.
Yep.
And so
And
that's what we're
and it's a
seeing.
totally different type of buyer, right? It's
Yeah,
a
and I
totally
kind of wait
different
for your
type
quick
of
question. I
person.
apologize. I got away from your questions. Yeah, and so what we're seeing, you're right. We're seeing, seeing young professional people, singles, young couples without children, sometimes even empty nesters who did that years ago somewhere else in the country, perhaps, and now they want to relive that urban experience because they're empty nesters, their kids are grown, and they love being in town, and they love that the vibrancy of those kinds of neighborhoods that are evolving, and they're fun. But they may not be the best neighborhood if you got the typical, 2.5 kids and, want to have a
And
cul-de-sac
the Volvo
experience.
station wagon, right? No
Right,
offense
that's
to
not that
any
experience.
no offense to any Volvo drivers out there, right?
That's right.
It's a very stereotypical thing to say, but I think our point comes across that it's the location and the experience that is going to speak to the right audience, right? Not everybody's going to be inclined to the same thing, and that makes me think now. I am very jealous, I have to say, of your marketing department with those segments, right? That are probably not easy to drill out when you get into lifestyle. For me and my team in St. Pete, we specialize a lot in the downtown waterfront or water view or water proximal condos. And so we have a specific website that is dedicated to that. Now, if you want to check out Jack's website, if you're interested in more than that, I want you to visit www.parksathome.com. And where I was going with my comments is I was going to give myself a shameless plug that if anybody wanted to check out www.downtownstpetecondos.com, you can see again that kind of focus that really drills to a targeted audience for a specific type of property. Now, so we've talked about that avenue, but I'm curious about some examples of specific properties that have a unique lifestyle and how we can market them to the right folks based on the lifestyle. And so I've heard of things that like in markets like yours, Jack, of having a barn party. Right. So instead of having like a open house, a traditional open house, having a barn party where you invite the community in, maybe it's a property that could be used additionally for event space or something like that. But I'm curious, Jack, do you have any examples that you can think of, or of something like that, or some other sort of event that would drive the right prospect group?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and I'll tell you, I've not done a barn party, but I have attended such. And I've got what's very interesting in our market. We do have a lot of beautiful rural properties, and some folks would call them gentleman farms. So these are not ranches. This is not thousands of acres. It's not necessarily even hundreds of acres, but maybe 10, 20, 30 acres with a barn on it. And a lot of times the buyers of these properties, they don't necessarily want livestock or horses. That's why they don't need a big sprawling bunch of acreage, but they do want that kind of rural experience. And so the barn becomes not necessarily a place for horses. It might be a place for a party barn. And a lot of folks love that whole vibe of having the barn for not necessarily a public event, but for private events, for family events, and things of that nature. It's a lot of fun. And then, of course, we do have folks who do want to have horses or cattle and that sort of thing. And so, again, that's the lifestyle they're looking for. And then you can market accordingly. One of my favorite categories along these lines, it's complete opposite, is the category that says college life. And this one that speaks to me personally because our kids are almost grown. Our youngest son is 17, so he'll be graduating in a couple of years. And so, for the first time in my life in many years, we can choose not only to go vacation anytime you want to, not worry about school schedules, but we can also choose where to live and not be thinking about what school zones. That's a new experience for me. And one of the places I want that I'm gravitating toward and have been for years are communities around colleges because the vibe typically those are more urban communities. Typically, if you're in a college community, there's always sidewalks on both sides of the street, and I love that. So now you've got, somewhere that's walkable or what was the word you used earlier, Tammy? I like the word you used.
Accessible.
Accessible, thank you, yeah, because our greenways we talked about earlier, our greenways are accessible. We say the word walkable, but they're accessible, they're paved. These are not
Hmm.
gravel or pea gravel. You feel like you have at the beaches in some places, you actually can, wheelchairs, skateboard, skates, walk, whatever. But I do like the sidewalks on both sides of the street, and college communities tend to have a vibrance that you can't necessarily put your finger on it, but just having all those young people in one area, an academic area, tends to create an energy that's just a really good feel. It's such a cool way to kind of bring communities together for a marketing purpose. And then when you see college life as a category for homes, upscale homes, you typically see coffee shops and cool restaurants and more urban experiences. And those all speak to me personally. But that's a way to market. So back to your original question, I know that we had a property recently. It was an in-town property near a college, it's in part of a college town, the college part of town. And so when we were putting all the photos online of the property, like we typically would do, the interior, the exterior, the drone, whatever. In addition, we put photos of the coffee shops, the restaurants, the nearby parks, all those things that are easily accessible without getting in a car. And that's a big deal to some buyers. And some of these college communities, in this particular case, or urban communities, are very upscale communities, but it's a very different kind of luxury
Hmm.
experience. That's the key word, experience, right? Lifestyle.
Yeah.
It's a very different lifestyle experience than the luxury home in the cul-de-sacs we discussed earlier. And oftentimes, the consumer or the buyer that might be looking at that urban experience might be somebody like myself, maybe an empty nester who did the cul-de-sac thing, and I didn't want a lifestyle change. I want to go downtown and do a college or do a high-rise living or whatever. So
For sure.
it's a cool way to think about marketing properties based on the experience.
And that makes me think a little further about the experience of showing properties that have a unique lifestyle. And so I know in my area, we have a lot of waterfront communities. And so it's an excellent opportunity to show property by boat, right? Because many times those folks that are looking in those communities, it's all about the boating lifestyle.
Mhm.
especially if they're coming from elsewhere in the country and like that's their jam, right? They want the boat, they want the experience. And so being able to take prospective buyers to see properties and neighborhoods by water can make an incredible impression, more so than just meeting them there in the driveway. And so I'm curious, have you shown some of your acreage or whatnot? I'm I'm thinking very romantically
Go
here
ahead.
because,
Let's hear. I know what you're about to
I love
say.
horseback
I
riding,
knew you
right?
were
And
going
I'm
to
just
say
wondering,
that.
did you know I was going to say it? Have you ever shown a property by horseback?
I have not, but I have friends who have. What is much more typical, and I'll be doing it next week actually. What is much more typical is showing property in a gator or some sort of four wheeler where you're taking your clients, and it's a lot of fun because you're going through pastures and up and down hills and through creeks. It's a really fun experience in the way that you show the property that's very different from the typical driving down the cul-de-sac. So yeah, the showing experience, your goal is try to capture the experience of the lifestyle. You know, you want we've got a country music singer's estate listed currently who's got a bunch of acreage with the barns, that sort of thing. And so when we show that property, one of the things that I always encourage folks to do is to take a walk through the pasture down to the pond and really kind of experience the lifestyle of the property. Now, I'm showing a much larger property, as I mentioned a moment ago, and next couple of weeks, couple different properties actually, where there are a couple hundred acres. And so we're going to get out and ride to the creeks, ride to the property, you know, where the other broker is kind of driving the four wheeler. And sometimes we'll have the seller do it. I've had my own sellers go with me on the showing, not to necessarily promote the property, but because they know it so well, they know where to go
Sure.
later. You know, I don't know what I'm doing.
They know where to go and where not to go, right?
Where to go, where not to go, exactly. They know where the killer views are, and they're selling the experience. So yeah, so we do that. It's a lot of fun. We had this is really cool. I got a call. It's been a few years ago. A good friend of mine, he just has an amazing business. He's my mentor actually, and sells a lot of large estate homes. One of the top luxury brokers in our market. And he had a country music singer's property listed, not their primary home. He sold that too later, but he had their lake house about an hour and a half from here listed. And the seller wanted him to bring 10 of the top brokers in our market out to the property to tour it. But to do that traditionally, you know, you're not going to get 10 brokers to spend basically 6 or 7 hours of their day to look at one property. And that's a big ask. So what he did was he has a private pilot, a couple of private pilots, and one of them flies a helicopter. And so he asked all of us to fly by helicopter from Nashville to the lake property so that we could get out there and get back in less than 2 hours. And two of my colleagues said they would not get on a helicopter, and they said they said that they felt like it was a ploy to earn more business. It's like, it's not the safest method of travel. I said, "No, it's fine." But anyway,
Oh my
so
goodness.
it was all joking, but we seriously, we were gonna all go tour the property by helicopter. We ended up canceling because of weather on that particular day, and then my friend Rick French, he sold the property the following week, so we never ended up touring it by helicopter. But then again, that was another one of those experiences he wanted them to see. Hey, we've got a helicopter pad at this property.
And that makes me think of a number of years ago, my mom and I, for the listeners who don't know, I work with my mom, and we were headed to Vail to teach the luxury home marketing class. And at the time, the most expensive property on the market in the United States was in Aspen, in the Aspen area. And we reached out to the agent who had that listed, right? And now we're not in Aspen, right? We're in Florida, but we happen to be in Colorado. And we said, could we take a half an hour of your time, right? If we stop through Aspen, then, would you give us a half hour of your time? And he said, sure, of course, right? Because what we wanted to know is how in the world do you market? And I think it was $150 million at that particular time. We were like, how in the world do you do that? And so he agreed to it. Now, for anybody who is a geography buff, you know that from the Denver airport, Aspen is not on the way to Vail, right? So
Right.
we made a detour to get to get this gentleman's time, and we sat with him, and we were asking him about how he markets a property like that. And he said, "Oh, in fact," he said, "what are you doing tomorrow? Because I'm coordinating a broker's event where I am flying in a dozen of the top agents who are likely to have, a buyer prospect or a pool of a sphere of influence who could afford this property. We're flying them in, picking them up at the small general aviation airport, and taking everybody in SUVs to the property. We're going to get on ATVs and tour the property, and then we're going to have lunch on a boat on the lake." He said, "Now, mind you, we're never going to see the inside of the property," which is
That
also an interesting thing. He said, but
yeah.
he had arranged this experience. And I nearly kicked myself because, the reason that we were there is that we were teaching the next day. So I didn't think that the class attendees would appreciate that I skipped out on that to go to a broker's open. But it was that kind of experience, not just for the prospective buyer, but for a likely realtor who could have that sphere of influence to make that impression. And so both you and I had the what coulda, shoulda, but never happened, but it still sticks with us in our minds of something creative.
Oh, yeah,
And
yeah, and I'll tell you what I love about that, Tammy. What's really cool about that whole scenario you described, not only is that broker doing a terrific job of promoting that luxury, one of a kind property by creating that experience for other brokers. But in turn, each of those brokers can take that experience and package it and distribute it on their social media, which does two different things. Number one, it also promotes that property for the listing broker who provided the original experience. Job one. That's why they're doing it, which is amazing.
mhm,
But number two, it also allows each of those brokers to go out there and promote their brand in social media to say, "Hey, look, I've been invited to the with this, elite group of brokers for this special experience to tour this unique property." And so now it's doing double duty. You're
yep,
promoting your brand and you're promoting that listing. It's doing some wonderful things. That's one of the cool things about I think this whole experience. You talked about earlier about the boat, touring properties by boat. We do that here on lakes, as
mhm,
opposed to the ocean. It's not nearly as exciting, I'm afraid, as it is in oceans and canals, but still, it's a beautiful way to tour properties. And it made me think. I think about 3 years ago, I had a client who I had shown properties here in Tennessee, and they decided our lakes are beautiful, but they really wanted the ocean. And so they allowed me to refer them to a broker, not in your market, but close down in the coastal Florida area. And so I actually called some of our colleagues in the leading RE and interviewed a couple brokers. And the thing that made me recommend this particular broker is what you said earlier. She said, "Jack," because they had indicated they wanted waterfront
mhm.
property, what their budget was, very healthy. I'll come to that in a second. But anyway, she said, "My husband and I live on a canal, and I would love to take your clients out by boat and show them the communities, give them a tour of the canals and the area and the bay and blah blah blah." And I thought this is the right one.
Yep.
It's gonna be the whole experience. So we did. I referred them. Their original budget was up to 10 million, and then I got a call about a month later from my client who I had referred saying that what a wonderful introduction we had made, and she'd given them these wonderful tours both to him and to his wife separately on 2 different visits,
Oh, that's
and
nice.
yeah, which is really nice, and so they got it 2 different perspectives because they were coming from out of state, and they purchased, what was the largest referral in our network that year, 18.5 million,
Wow.
based on the experience that agent provided. They almost doubled their budget. And he called me. This is really cool too, different topic, but he called me and said, "Before I sign this contract, I want to make sure that you're being compensated because what you did made a big difference to what's happening for my family right now." And
Wow.
I said, "We're taken care of." I said, "You're the only person who's ever made that phone call to me." It was a really nice gesture on his part, and it worked out so well for everybody.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. And boy, that's just karma all the way around,
For
right?
sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah. So that experience and that lifestyle piece, I think about you've shared with me before that some of the unique features in your area that people are looking for, home studios was
Yeah,
one.
that's a biggie. Yeah, it's interesting because you know not only Nashville obviously is a music center. Everybody knows that, it's really not. It's not by a long shot being the largest part of our economy, but it's the part. It's the fun part to talk about. It's the part everybody hears about. Lord knows Dolly has done her part in the last few years. Um, but aside from all the major, major studios in town doing mainstream music, there's lots and lots of musicians doing all sorts of music, different genres, not just country
Mhm.
or Christian, but all sorts of genres. And they want to be in a music center. And so anyway, we've got a lot of clients, luxury clients, who this I've seen this happen multiple times where we'll have typically a couple where one person is a music person and it's all about the studio and the studio experience, meaning what that space looks and feels like, how it lives for studio recordings, what is it near in terms of other people in the music industry and the music scene. And then I think one couple in particular who purchased actually in a college town, a college area near Belmont University. And that was a big deal to him. He wanted to be near the university, wanted this studio. He taught guitar or teaches guitar by YouTube in that studio. Once he identified that he loved the studio, then it was up to the wife to decide whether she loved the house and the community. And we did that thing several times. And then we hit one that he loved the studio and she loved the
She loved the house.
historic
Yep.
home. And
Yep.
all the boxes were checked. But that was a driving force behind the purchase decision. It was about the experience of the music scene first,
Mhm. Mhm.
and then the home.
And so let me ask you, so that was an experience representing a buyer. I know that you have represented listings that had those kind of features, whether it's a studio or something else. What kinds of avenues, like events or marketing or whatnot, have you utilized to really hone down on who's most likely to be interested, as opposed to just relying on mass marketing?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, interesting in our market, one of the things I've done, print advertising is very tricky. And I think a lot of us look at print advertising it's as much a vehicle for promoting our brand
Mhm.
as it is for promoting the product. I think most of our sellers, they want to see their stuff in print. There's something tactile. You see, you touch it, you feel it, you feel the
They can
magazines
show their friends.
next to other friends, and then there's a good promotional piece there. They can give out magazines and whatnot. So there's a real viable part of that print magazine. But the reality is, most of us, I think we're seeing our clients are not finding things because of print publications.
Mhm.
However, the caveat to that would be these very unique niche opportunities, and one of these opportunities will be something like studios, music studios, and we have in our market some local publications
Mhm.
that have a very small distribution, a very targeted distribution to people in the music industry. And I think in particular, there's a magazine called Music Row Magazine, and there's one issue in particular that features all the top. It's like headshots and condensed bios of the top movers and shakers in the music
Mm.
industry. It comes out once a year. That is a great publication to drop real estate advertising for luxury homes, particularly luxury homes with studios in. So although I'm not a huge proponent of print advertising, this targeted print advertising is terrific. So that's an example, one example of ways you can reach a very targeted market.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
there's websites and chat rooms and
Sure,
all kinds
sure.
of platforms you can do, social media, of course, but that's one that's I think really calls for the print as well.
And, it makes me think of the fact, just within the last couple of weeks, I actually had a call from a colleague locally. Ironically, she was in the middle of listening to our podcast, the one that was focused on hard to sell luxury properties, and
Right.
she had a toughie. So she asked me to come and see it and brainstorm with her. And so just to for frame of reference, it's a $7.8 million waterfront home in a really exclusive location. It's on 200 feet of open water frontage with direct access to Tampa Bay. The thing is, it was built in 1964 by a really well known local architect who later personally directed the remodeling in 2011 so that it maintained the
Oh,
design
wow.
character. Think Frank Lloyd Wright,
Sure.
right? This is the style. So
Mid-century
she is
modern.
absolutely, but in a very specific genre, right? Like, so let's just add the price tag, go over the top. And so she's the third agent to represent the home over the course of a year. And this home is super unique and absolutely is not going to appeal to an ordinary buyer, right? Not the buyer in the $7-8 million range who wants that waterfront rent. Like this is a different buyer. And so we brainstorm things like advertising on websites that specialize in architecturally significant properties, of which there are a number. Hosting an event for the local preservation society, which is
Oh, love it.
really,
Yeah.
really important. And
Yep.
even reaching out in our city, we have a director of historic preservation.
Sure. Yeah.
And so reaching out there and other agents who are legacy, families within the area. So I'm hopeful that those are some ways that she can reach the right buyer. But it kind of speaks to what we've been talking about focus on the lifestyle, focus on the thing that's going to appeal to the right buyer, and weave that story and that experience in it.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that too, because when you talk about historic homes, this is another one of their wonderful categories, of homes. It has more to do really with the experience and the square footage, and the number of
Yep.
rooms. Not when we market historic homes, our luxury historic homes typically are in a historic overlay. Okay,
Hmm.
uh, in addition to doing all the typical photos, we don't do drone photography because these are streets typically they're tree lined streets. You can't see anything.
Right.
All you see is treetops, which is a cool thing. But in terms of marketing the experience, in addition to the photos of the home, the subject property, we'll do photos a lot of times of other homes in the neighborhood. We'll do streetscape photos and photos of other homes down the street to give the buyer the feel of what not the house like, but the experience. Here's the street,
Yeah.
sidewalks on both sides. We'll promote things. I may have mentioned this in a past podcast. I'm pretty sure I did. One of our historic neighborhoods is known to be the primo trick or treat neighborhood.
Yes. Yes.
And it's so much so that certain historic homes have a tradition that is specific to that house every year. Okay. And so it's probably been 10 years ago, one of these homes, one on the market, it was the home that always had the jack-o'-lantern collection. They had in their front yard bleachers, and it probably had 50 to 100 jack-o'-lanterns, really good, well executed jack-o'-lanterns every year at that home. That was almost like the trademark for that property. When that home sold, the neighbors or excuse me, the new buyer had first right of refusal on the bleachers to be the jack-o'-lantern home, and if they didn't wanna carry on the tradition, there were neighbors on a waiting list,
Oh
literally,
my.
to be that home. So anyway, but it's very interesting when you market a neighborhood like that, we talk about those things in the marketing. This is the number one trick or treat neighborhood,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah. This is not something you touch and feel, but it's part of the experience. And so I think it's really important once again that we're talking about, one, if you're representing a buyer, how to talk about the experience and bring them into the right area, right neighborhood based on experiences. But two, on the flip side, as listing brokers, how to convey the experience that goes along with a house.
Yep.
It's such an important component of what we do, I think.
And that as we get to our wrap up, that also just makes me realize that's one of the joys of working in the upper tier, because we transcend that transactional, beds and baths, which is oh so important, oh so
Sure, of
important. Please,
course.
please don't let me make light of any price point and the value of our real estate professionals in any price point. But there is something to be said for when you're working in the luxury space, that you have the opportunity to embrace the lifestyle attributes and really be a matchmaker in a way that is really significant. So I'm super glad that we talked about this today.
I am too. And it's so funny. I just realized we went through this entire segment and we didn't discuss what would be the obvious go-to, which is golf communities and country club, and those are all big experience communities. But I think the point that you and I are making today is there's lots of experiences, and
That's
you're
right.
right. When it comes to luxury brands or the luxury real estate, it's a blessing. We've got all these really wonderful and cool and very unique experiences we get to sell, and it transcends just basic square footage and architecture. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
Excellent. So I think that ends us on a really high note. And I hope that all of you out there listening have enjoyed this episode. Thank you so much for joining us. If you're interested in learning more about the Institute for Luxury Home Marketing, you can find more at www.luxuryhomemarketing.com. And if you like what you just heard, please share it with a friend. And don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. And if you've got a hot topic that you'd like us to discuss in a future podcast, feel free to let us know. Send an email to info@luxuryhomemarketing.com. Thanks so much for listening.